Right. So thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me. I wanted to start by just asking, because a lot of the people who are sort of involved with the Artivist Foundation that I work for are young people who are creative or artistic and want to make a difference. What advice would you have for artists who aren't sure how to use their art as effective activism?
Don't hold. So there's the one of the most important things to do whenever you're trying to activate or facilitate is to leave most of what you think you know back with the rest of your work, which is probably under the bed or in a box or something. So just leave your ideas and any kind of preconceived notions you have. You really have to set those aside. So, I mean, this is all stuff that I've learned, from doing this since I can't remember when. So the idea that as as an artist, you can offer something, from your personal experience to people that are just, maybe can't really, the only definition that they have for art is either decoration or entertainment, then, you know, that's it. So, and even as you're sitting there, you're thinking like, what else? If it's not entertainment, if it's not decoration, then what is it? So, so actually, that's when art begins. Is whenever the creative individual begins to rely on their own resources as their own problem solving abilities to address issues that they come in contact with whenever they begin to work with some idea, because that's, as artists, is what we do. We are problem solvers. Even if you go back to your own, to your own work, your own practice, basically you come up with an idea and then you have, a blank piece of paper, or photographers, they start with a scene, artists, right? Whatever it is, you start with something that you think is going to happen. And then it's trying to get from where you're starting to where you'll finish. So the organic thinker, creative people, they'll go from A to D to F to N, and then like figure out how to get to the finish. The linear thinker will go from A and then solve that, and then go to B, and then they solve that before they can get to C and then solve that. So that's basically the difference between an organic thinker and sort of a linear thinker. So given that we are about solving problems, the way that we sort of address ourselves to those issues is not necessarily with something that is in our, I don't know, toolbox. It's a popular phrase, but it's the essence of who we are. It's the essence of how we deal with our lives and address problems. And the essence is to figure out an interesting way to solve a problem. So then if we're going to talk about activism, then you'll name a problem. Name a problem.
I mean, like recycling?
What a wonderful thing. So how do you get, so then as a creative individual, trying to address this issue of, sort of trying to help people understand how they can recycle. So what's valuable to people? You have to ask them. I don't know what that is. So you have to go and you have to ask them. like what is it that people value in their lives. Then you have to figure out what they want to hold on to, and then things that they feel like they want to get rid of. And then like embedded in that, the concept of consuming and possessing, right? Because that's where all of this business comes from, is a way to sort of help people understand what they can let go. And whenever you can get them, and it, you're not going to get them to, suddenly get a whole neighborhood, start recycling, But what you can do is you can probably knock on doors, and you can, maybe engage people in a conversation. And maybe you can ask them, what's most important to them, what they think might be important to somebody else, and then what else they have in their house that they think they might be able to share. So then whenever you begin to establish things that they feel like they can let go, like just one thing that they think they can let go that might be beneficial to somebody else, which is the thing that you bring out later. So by letting one thing go, then they can see the direct effect of letting one thing go, and it's not going to cost them anything. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to change their lives in a radical way. And the thing that they're going to let go is going to benefit somebody else. So now they're feeling good about themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So now suddenly I can it's like this really wonderful puzzle. I'm going to start running around the house trying to find other things that I can sort of let go and give to people, right? Suddenly I'm recycling. If you had gone and, knocked on the door and said, "Hi, we're going to do a recycling project," people would have been like, "Oh, I got some paper bags for you," But now suddenly you've embedded in people's minds that as they begin to divest and they begin to enrich the lives of others, this whole cycle starts to occur, right? Now, it has nothing to do with anything visual. It just has to do with you and I sitting here talking about an idea. And then and we come back to our own resources and we try to cook up a way to help people understand how they can help each other and help themselves and help the planet and, on a much larger scale. Mm-hmm. But it all comes down to me, giving away my hairbrush because I don't need it. So you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. So where's the art? So now what starts to happen is so the first thing is to, quit thinking about like visual, whatever, or writing or something. The next thing is you put your ego over here as well. You get rid of that. The third thing is that, so you and I are having a dialogue about this. You and I are talking about it, right? Mm-hmm. So then, what is that now? That's me not thinking that I've got all the answers because I'm the visual artist. That's me understanding that together we might be able to accomplish it. That's me understanding that I'm not that smart. I don't have all the answers. That's me understanding that if we go to, like, across the street, down the road, that if we begin to listen to, people that might be involved a little bit in a way, that the answers, because there's a bunch of answers, lie in other parts of who we are, how we function, and how we inform each other's experience, right? Mm-hmm. Because, like I said, okay, so maybe I'm smart enough to know that I'm not that smart. Okay, I'm not smart. that I know how stupid I am about, like, a whole bunch of stuff. So when I need to try to solve a problem, you go to somebody who knows. You go look it up. You go find other people who might be able to contribute. You talk about it with your friends and your family. You talk about it with maybe a specialist. You incorporate other people into the experience. You become inclusive. That's the third thing. You become inclusive in your practice, right? So you're not doing it all by yourself. You're not coming up with some solution. The idea that you begin with might look really different than what you wind up with at the end. And so that's where, like, divesting yourself of your, like, egotistical ways is beneficial, because you have to understand how these ideas and these projects evolve. Because the fourth thing, because the main thing is the thing itself, is solving the problem. That's the main thing. Like, all the rest of it is like, that was a good idea when I started out, but that's okay. Because we got the thing done.
Mm-hmm.
Because we did something about the environment. This guy had a bunch of seeds in his garden. This guy over here had trees that he wanted to get rid of. This one over here wanted to had a backhoe that we could go and plant the trees. This one over. So now suddenly all these people are involved. So what do you do? What do you do? Do you have a practice?
Oh, I'm a writer.
Oh, okay. It's just like we need writers. So, because so you're good with words and ideas, and you can put all of this stuff in a way that people can understand. You have ways that you can help people understand what's happening. So you can write about this thing. You can disseminate these ideas. Other people that they might be photographers, they might be writers like you, they might be other people that are creative that can also lend their expertise to the process as as we begin to facilitate this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that through that association, now, this idea, this initiative, this project that we're doing, it's got a life, and it begins to live. And people, because they feel included, people, they own that, they've got a hairbrush in there. That's my hairbrush. I donated. Look, it's over there now. Mrs. Jameson down the street, she's got that hairbrush. So, so whenever people recognize the fact that, that there's something in what they're doing, that they can recognize the part that they contribute, then, man, the thing has that many more lives. It has that many more dimensions. It has that much more depth, to the point where people that's when the thing is activated, right? And that's when they own it. And that's when, basically through no fault of your own, that the thing can live, hopefully, and continue when it gets, as they say, traction and evolves. The fifth thing is hopefully the thing. In order for the thing to be alive, it has to evolve. It has to change. It has to move. It has to breathe. It has to expand and contract according to the needs of the community that it's serving, whatever that is, right? It might die. Hopefully, it dies because it led a wonderful, rich, and full life, so that it just basically plays itself out, and maybe it dies. You can attend to it, and you can continue to nurture it and help it grow and all that kind of stuff, if it's a really great idea. But in most cases, things have a life, because some of the oldest living things on Earth have a life. Things come and go. So, maybe the idea was good for what it was. Maybe it needs to die so that it can come back as something else. So that's the other thing. You don't want to, just smother the thing to death with love. You want let it go so that it can go and live and breathe in the community and serve its purpose, and then die out. So if it has to, sometimes things just, some things want, I don't mean to talk about myself, but I did a project years and years ago that was like, it was part of a larger artistic palette. What I was doing is I was talking about like food, clothing, housing, communication, but man, people got stuck on the food. I did this food project. I couldn't stop because people like food, doing food. It was like every single time the phone rang, it was like, can you come and help us? We're thinking of trying to do a garden. And I'm going like, oh my gosh, okay, y'all need to eat. That's fine. So every time. But it's changed. People still want to do gardens, but like I'm done. I'm sort of done doing gardens. So yeah, but that was that. But then what people didn't get, what people don't see, is that what I was doing was I was contextualizing the role of the modern artist in society, using the essential aspects of who we are as human beings to basically address all of those issues in a creative way, like I just said. So the artist might use the community as a palette to address issues of, because I had done like education, food, like I said, housing, communications, environment, like you said. So, so how, as creative individuals, as artists, can we activate our dedication to these roles? This goes back to, way back a long time ago, when artists were, sort of before the Renaissance, I guess, when artists were an integral part of communities, when we helped help people figure out how to live, whenever we built places for people to go and have rituals, whenever we, help people engage in self-adornment, whenever, like all these things that we do as humans were somehow closely integrated to the creative aspects of who we are as humans. Whenever before, all of the things that we did was not consumed. It was not a product. It was not commodified, right? It was not entertainment. It was not decoration. It was part of the way that we exist, and known and appreciated for that, and honored.
So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, being part of the community, having a lot of people involved, the interaction and everything, obviously the pandemic has sort of changed some of that. Do you feel like it has had an effect on the way that you're able to, do art that's important for the community, have these relationships involved in creating art?
Well, nothing lasts forever. So, I mean, there are, I was sort of in the middle of doing some things when we weren't allowed to travel anymore. Talking to people doesn't seem to be a problem. I mean, I've been talking more to people, in the past 6 months. My goodness. But it's lovely because I get to meet, people that I probably would have never been able to meet or talk to before, which is nice. And I think in my generally, what I'll say is that people can function in a cyclical manner, right? There can be a time for reflection. There can be a time for doing. There can be a time for activism, right? There can be a time to strategize. And here we are. We just came up with this, really wonderful way to commence like a kind of a recycling project. Oh, and for people to be reflective and for people to think about like who they are and what's valuable and, you know, what they can divest themselves of. And so that's a whole other kind of a conversation. So hopefully, you know, during these times, we're able to sit back and reflect and gather our resources and try to figure out interesting and creative ways that we might move forward in the days that we might have access to other resources that we don't right now. So the question that we're asking ourselves is, oh boy, what are we going to do when we can go outside? You know, ooh, what's the first project we're going to do? Ooh, I've got this idea. I've been talking about, you know, so, you know, I don't know if you can't see. Well, you can't see too far out in the back, but there's a vat of indigo that's been brewing out there for most of the summer. Oh, this lovely shirt used to be white. So, you know, there's little things that you can do around the house, like, you know, brew up a vat of indigo. You know, oh, there's some bark on that tree. Let's test it. And maybe we can make some natural dyes. So, you know, so there's junk that you have available, maybe things that you've been taken for granted, maybe things that you know of and touch every day, maybe individuals that you haven't looked at for a long time, maybe ways to communicate with people that you've neglected or forgotten about. What are those things in your lives that you do value? What are those things that you can share? What are things that come and go that you should cherish while you have them?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, being around and being inside, you know, with your cat or whatever. So what's valuable about that?
I also wanted to ask you about social media because I think we've seen this summer that that is sort of a channel that a lot of activists are using more and more. Do you see it as sort of an effective way to raise awareness, change people's minds, you know, make art more available? Do you think it does have that positive impact?
There are people that do wonderful and amazing. People are pretty kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people that do wonderful and amazing things with much, much more and with much, much less. You know, I know people that do incredible things with coconut husks, dried leaves, and tree bark, and just make clothes, and they make money. They make a whole system of trade. They, with, you know, just a tree and some leaves and, you know, coconut husks and fire. And that's all they got, you know, but they build an entire community around just that sort of one thing. So that's one thing. But, you know, us here, you know, the way that we live in these United States, and yeah, you know, people have found a way to use social media and computers, and, you know, people have gone out and they've done wonderful things in the street with nothing but their own voices and their own experience. People have, you know, come to the aid of others. People have, you know, assisted. People have, and then other people that were well versed with social media have, you know, taken all of that information, that raw material, and then used it, you know, to help the cause, to advance. So, you know, everybody's got a personal resource. Everybody's got something that they can use. Everybody has, you know, and if they don't, they can collaborate if they're not afraid, you know, or if they are afraid, then they can figure out how to get over it. So, yes, yeah, it's another tool, is what I'm saying, to finish the sentence. I'm sorry. So, yeah, it's another tool.
Mm-hmm. And how important do you think, I mean, I guess this would depend on what project you're doing, but do you think broad awareness and spreading the message to lots and lots of people is very important for activism, or can have a really strong impact if you just connect with a few people?
It depends on the project, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Oh, it depends on the purpose.
Hmm.
So it depends on, does the thing need to talk, speak, involve, include like masses of people? Do you have an issue that's that important to you that we need to go and put it in the media? I was going to say newspaper. Do we need to make a billboard out of that thing? Do we need to put it in like a venue that 100,000 people are going to see it? Even if 100,000 people see it, are they going to get it?
Hmm.
Or, I keep wanting to refer to projects that I've done, but, or is working with small groups of people in a very intense and effective way going to help to advance your issue as far as it would if, like, you know, hundreds of people see it. And again, once again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Hmm. And I think there's this conception, which I don't know if this is always true, that art is very personal and sort of, I think most people, I mean, you're saying don't be egotistical, but I think most people, a lot of artists sort of feel like I'm going to tell my story, I'm going to tell my experience. Um, is there a way to use your own personal experience to connect with others, to connect with a cause that isn't egotistical, doesn't sort of defeat the purpose?
There's a full range, you know, of resource in the within the context of our own personal expression. You know, we have work that's that can be, should be deeply and profoundly intimate, right? There's things that you might not want to share with everybody. There's some things that you don't really need to be sharing with everybody. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you know, there may be things that you want people to help you with. You want to work on with people. Performative artists understand this. You know, they may have work that they feel is, you know, like too deep and too personal. But then they have other work that they just jump right out in front of people and be dancing around and singing and, you know, using music and broadcasting. You know, social media people are the same way. You know, they get on the internet and they be broadcasting all of this stuff. Some of the stuff that I see on social media, that's should be private, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then other things, I think, when people share, can be deeply and profoundly moving. So, so what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that artists need to stop everything now and go and collaborate and all that. What I'm saying is that if there's an aspect of what they're doing where they feel like they could include somebody, where they feel like they could reach out to people, where they feel like the idea may be bigger than themselves, where they feel like maybe they could get out a little bit and look beyond themselves. Some people are incapable. Some people don't have that in their experience or their mindset. They don't have the tools to do it. They don't. But, you know, if they feel like they're going to burst open if they don't do something or help somebody or activate an idea, then they, you know, talk to somebody who knows, who can help them get done what they feel like they need to be done. There are a lot of, you know, public art projects that look like something that somebody moved, you know, it's supposed to be for the community, but looks like something that somebody did in their studio and put in a public place. So, you know, didn't talk to the community, didn't include anybody in the process, you know, but they just had this thing, you know, and was like, I think I might be able to contribute this to the community. Yes, to the community. Oh, here you are. Yes, this is my gift. So, You know, so yeah, if you can, then do. If you need to, then do it. If you want to and don't know how, then talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not, then don't. If it's not something that you feel like you're invested in or don't want to or don't understand it, then don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Leave that thing in the studio.
Yeah.
She's like, yep.
Yes. And so you've done obviously a lot of different projects over the
Mm,
course of your career.
yeah.
Is there any time that you sort of felt like, oh, this is really working, like on a different level, sort of, where you realized some way of connecting to people, connecting to the community that you hadn't thought of before?
Yes, I've had successes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've had sort of embarrassing failures, and which is how I learned, and then I've learned also from the successes. So, and I've had sometimes in some areas I've had like serious pushback. In one community, I was asked to remove this piece. It's just pictures,
Mm-hmm.
but they closed the museum
Wow.
until I got my stuff out of it. So in other areas, I had no. I thought I was talking to people. In this one project I did in Oulu, in Finland. I just thought that this wonderful woman, uh, and I would stand because I don't speak Finnish. So we're standing there, and I had the microphone and tape recorder, and I'd take these pictures as a way, and I used the photograph to get into the community, and basically try to figure out what's happening. But it turned out that people were listening, and people were paying attention. And as I was talking to many of the immigrants that had immigrated into the community, and I was talking to a lot of the people that had grown up in the community, and whenever I took all of those images and stuck them in the same place where everybody had to go in and look at them together at the same time, it turned out that there was apparently that there was much less aggression against the people that had immigrated into that community.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm still very happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
One project that I did in New Zealand, and they're very happy that I came to visit. And the idea was that they had a small community of indigenous people that didn't feel as if they were being seen or heard from. So we did a billboard project. And they, it provided a vehicle, it was a voice for this population to be able to express themselves. And they're still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy that they are. I don't know how much I really had to do with it, but I guess because I was there and we talked about it and they got started a little bit, it got momentum and it's still going. It's very different than it was when the project that I did, but the name is still there. And they're still, if you go to the Polyphony website, you'll see my pictures are still up. So I guess they still like me. So I love them. I mean, it was just amazing. It was a wonderful thing. So yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much to say about that stuff. I mean, the fact that there's nothing to sell, there's no commodity, there's no item, the value and the worth of all of that has to do with what happened with the people.
Mm-hmm.
My contribution. I mean, I just took pictures. I mean, there's some of them were pretty nice, but but the thing about it is that the photographs, my practice, those images, that part of it was just it was like this other little project, since you asked me about work, so you let the ego out. So I did do another project with a small group of individuals that we were talking about before, where I took these pictures from, that I had collected for many years. And I made little, postcard-sized images. And the whole thing was about bigotry and race and bullying. And I had no idea. Like, I'm not I just take pictures, right? So, what I did though, is I wanted to have a conversation with these people, and I wanted to try to figure out who the bully was. So there was this, group of these young people, and I showed them, 20 pictures. I laid them all out on the table. And, there were people from Nepal, Mexico, Brazil, and South America, people from India, Japan. There were people from China, all these different people. And so I asked these young people who they thought would make the best friend. And so they would point, and the choices were always really interesting. Because here you have these, these young people picking out photographs of these cranky looking old people from East Africa. And so the next question is, what is it about that person why do you think that person would make a good friend? Well, I think they'd be fun to go shopping with. And I think that I'd like to take them home to dinner and introduce them to my parents, because I think, so finally what was happening is that these people were talking about themselves. They were using the photographs to initiate a dialogue about, it was an internal dialogue that I was able to then figure out, whenever there was the one or two youngsters that were going like, no, maybe that one, I can go out with my gun. I'll take this one with my gun. Oh, no, great. Okay. I got your number. So it became easy to try to figure out who was who by basically how people thought they were describing another photograph, but were really describing themselves. But it was very intense, and it was a very small community. So I think that we were able to have a very profound effect on a small amount of people. So that project was made for just a few people and not like a community of a few hundred. So, yeah.
Okay. And I think the last question I wanted to ask was, so that I think the pandemic has obviously exacerbated a lot, or just made more visible, a lot of longstanding inequalities. I mean, I'm assuming across the world, but particularly in the US, and made people more aware. Do you think that makes this moment an especially important time for artists to get involved in activism, for anyone to get involved in activism?
So around the turn of the other century, not this last one, but before that, there was a war, around the mid 1800s in the United States. Well, yeah, between the United States and people that didn't want to be part of the United States anymore. And then that war ended. And then there was a short period of prosperity for Black people, for African Americans. Yeah, African Americans. So between 1860, 1870, these people, so many Black people, newspapers, they started, communities. There was congressmen, there were Black people were, judges, doctors. They were, elected officials. They enjoyed investing in, they began to accumulate wealth. And then later, that, some people, I guess, in some people's estimation, we just got too uppity. So somebody decided that that was really not a very good idea for, you know, Black people to be making so much progress. So then they wanted to do something about it. So, you know, there was a big backlash, and, you know, there was a sort of this sort of indescribable reaction to, you know, the progress that people had been making. And then there was a plague. There was a terror, you know, in 1911, 1910?
1918?
19, yeah, okay, thank you very much. And because I can't, it's all soup up in my head. But yeah, there was this big influenza epidemic, you know, thousands and thousands of people died. What I'm talking about is I'm talking about the way that human nature works. I'm talking about like how the propensity, since we can't seem to break the pattern that we've established for ourselves, how our nature tends to repeat itself because we can't jump out of that pattern, right? So in those days, I didn't see any, you know, there was an influenza, there was a plague. I didn't see anybody, you know, running out into the streets and doing anything. What I'm saying is that I don't think that the pandemic has caused anybody to run and jump out into the streets and do anything. There wasn't a plague in the early 50s, in the mid to early 50s, when people came out into the streets to demonstrate against social injustice, right?
Mm-hmm.
People, what I'm saying is that, like, throughout the course of history in North America, there has existed a level of intolerance for people that were sort of different, to the point of genocide, right? There has been like an intolerance for people whenever the sort of dominant culture could see progress being made. It didn't just happen 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
This disease that plague has been embedded in societies even before there was a North America named that way. That kind of, before there was the United States, people, you know, were buying and selling and trading people. So, you know, that kind of sort of heinous behavior has been with us for the whole time. And it isn't like we haven't recognized it. It isn't like we haven't had the opportunity before, because we certainly did. At every opportunity, at every turn, we were able to make some kind of progress. But then but the opposition to our progress is so embedded in the society that it was perceived as a kind of natural behavior. So that for us to make any progress, at times it almost seemed impossible, to the point of sacrifice, to the point where people literally had to begin to sacrifice themselves for the cause. People had to lay down. People would, you know, confront the established society to make a statement. The part that I lived through as a young person was the part where we really had to get up and go out and stand and chain ourselves to buildings. Whenever we had to go and sit and not eat, go on hunger strikes. The part when we had to assail political officials. The part when we stood in front of the National Guard in certain parts in my home state and were massacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
We took those opportunities as we could. As society presented themselves, we took advantage of the opportunities that we had. And I think that this particular opportunity, the fact that people are sitting at home, they don't have very much to do, they're not having jobs. It's not that people have, I think the level of peaceful protest that has prevailed across the United States and ultimately the world, I think was in part, to kind of agree with you, facilitated by the fact that a lot of people are sitting at home with not much to do. But the thing that I'm trying to emphasize, and the thing that I want to keep in mind, is that there have been other opportunities, and I think at every possible moment we tried. We tried to make a statement, and we tried to go and help people understand the level at which we are suffering as a society. I'm not just talking about Black people or oppressed, but the Native Americans took Alcatraz. They took it back. They took, they rose up in the, whenever they tried to run a pipeline through the home country. I know, a former student, a friend of mine right now is working with his community, Native American community. And they're trying to, they're taking this opportunity to make a statement about taking back their community because the treaties were broken and, the dominant society has, see, now you got me preaching. The dominant society has sort of ignored all the treaties. But, this community of Shinnecock Indians have basically said, well, you broke the treaty and we want Southampton back because it's ours. So, which I think is fantastic, because that gets Southampton, which is wonderful. But so the point is not that people are demonstrating, not that people are in the street, really, but who's listening? Who is taking this opportunity to listen, and who is taking this opportunity to react? Because it's not like we haven't been screaming all along. It's just like, oh, finally, we're being heard. Finally, somebody's taken an opportunity to listen. Finally, people are joining us in the street, finally.
Just to follow up on that really quickly, if that is the case, people have been protesting some injustices for years, for centuries, and even when progress is made, it maybe gets pushed back and the progress is sort of ruined. How do you still believe in, activism's power or raising awareness to accomplish things?
Not to not do anything is to die.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of activism that you're talking about, because activism, as we were talking about, there's a range, right? Mm-hmm. Activism can be the simple act of simply addressing an injustice, no matter how small it is. Like the project that I did, well, that was really complex, but it can be something as simple as, two people walk into a drugstore. I might be standing there, and my friend, who doesn't look like me, might be standing next to me. And the person behind the cash register looks at my friend and says, "Can I help you?" And my friend says, "He was here first," right? That's an act of resistance. That's addressing systemic racism, right? So it can be like any little thing can be an act of resistance and can help other people understand what they're doing wrong and what they could be doing to help.
Mhm. I mean, I think that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you would want to say, just sort of in closing?
These are such large issues.
Mhm.
I think that it's important for people to understand and to remain a little bit outside themselves, to think a little bit beyond their own experience, and to try to include other people and who they are and what they do in their practice, to, especially in these days, reach out a little bit to other individuals and maybe come up with ways that they can be effective in understanding other people and maybe even establishing or creating dialogue. But then most importantly, for us to begin to evolve and to adapt as a society, we have to begin to break the bond, the strangling bond of human nature. It's that impulse, it's that fear that we might not understand somebody that doesn't look or act like you. Rather than have that sort of, to act on that gut reaction, it would serve us, it would serve humanity if we would ask questions first and then act later. If we can break those patterns, then I think that we can start to begin to make progress.
Mhm.
And it's evident, you can see it, in the past, whenever people begin to make progress, it's because people have dialogue. In South Africa, after apartheid, they had the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Or the hearings, people would sit, they would talk about the worst things that occurred during apartheid. But everybody was able to sit down and listen. And progress was made. And I think that is something that needs to happen these days. But since this is a completely different country, it needs to happen in a completely different way. It needs to happen in a way that we can digest, and in a way that we can understand, and in a way that might be effective for people here in these United States. So yeah, it's just trying to break that sort of terrible pattern of our nature that wants to suppress the progress of other people.